to Cointelbro, and this week we have not one but two guests for you. But our main guest is Sabastian Hunt. This guy is dope. He's a rapper. He's an author. He works with children. He's met President Obama. He's written for the Dixie Chicks. I spoiled half the episode, but I just needed you to know up front. This is not a nobody that I have on here. This is an incredibly interesting person, and he has a lot of stories he wants to share with us. Welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here. The Dixie Chicks thing is not true, though. I was just joking with my sister about that, so I gotta apologize. I didn't know it was gonna make it to this level. I didn't know my live was gonna make it big time.
Oh, you should have just kept it going. I guess you could have been sued. All right, well, now we know. And that's good. I was going to call you out anyways. You wrote for Lady Anti-Black Lives Matter. Now I don't have to say that. So now we know that part's not true. Everything else is true, though, right? Or were those other things lies you told your sister as well?
I didn't tell my sister. Right? The other things have a lot of truth in them. Yeah.
I guess we'll piece that together.
We're going to piece everything together.
All right, well, I have you on the hot seat. You're this week's guest, and you're coming to us. Tell us where you're coming from right now.
Omaha, Nebraska.
All the way from Omaha, Nebraska. I don't think I've had anyone from Omaha, Nebraska. So if you're out in Omaha, Nebraska, we're representing you today.
Thank you, because we've done a big contribution to college football, so we should be represented.
Exactly. Y'all got Warren Buffett out there. Does he live out there?
Yeah, he lives maybe like a mile from where I'm at right now.
Word. Is he your homie?
He is not my homie. I would like to be homies with him, but it just hasn't come up yet.
You haven't had an opportunity. You haven't thought of a plot for your paths to cross?
I have. Every Berkshire Hathaway, I always think about those plots, and they just they don't come true. A lot of my friends have met him, and so, I'm pretty good friends with one of his friends, but that's about it.
Interesting. So, in Milwaukee, where I grew up, there was this guy that would walk around shirtless, and his name, we would call him Milverine, because he looked like Wolverine.
Okay, this is the Milwaukee version.
Yeah, so it was like you had a good day if you spotted Milverine. Like, hey, I saw Milverine earlier. Is it Warren Buffett like that, where just he walks around, or he happens to be at a grocery store or at a store somewhere, and you're like, hey, Warren Buffett sighting?
People would always say that they'd see him at this particular McDonald's, like a mile from his house, ordering a Coke, or they'd be mowing his lawn. I'm not sure that he does that anymore. Everybody says they've seen him do that, but I've never. The thing is, it's kind of crazy. Like, if you probably went to Bill Gates' house or any other extremely rich person's house, you would expect it to be like kind of set back far from the road, maybe security, fences, gates. His house is literally on a main thoroughfare, and you could get right by it. I drive by it almost every single day to go to work. He's a pretty available person, but you don't see him, though. I don't, at least.
So you could just walk up to his door and knock and be like, hey, how's it going, sir?
I mean, he does have a gate around his house, so I don't know if you could necessarily walk up to his door without.
Okay. So there's some level of protection. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're definitely the first guest I've had on the show that has run their own commune. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, so I would call it a capitalist commune. The concept was called Year of the Startup, and so what we did is we just found different entrepreneurs that trying to launch companies that already had an early stage company, and then we had different houses, and then they could just live together and kind of rely on one another for advice, kind of inspiration. And then we had more of like a formal program where we'd bring in different mentors, have different events. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Ran that for 4 years, and the high water mark of that, the most interesting time was had a we called it the startup mansion. So an 18 bedroom, 10 bathroom house, just filled up all the way with entrepreneurs. I brought different interns in, from, one from Johns Hopkins, one from just kids from all over the place. And it was just really exciting time. A lot of young people with ideas coming together, kind of based on this idea that, we might not be able to influence the entire city necessarily with the resources that we have, but you could certainly bring that density that cities thrive on to create innovation. You could bring that to a house or a neighborhood. And so a lot of our houses were in the same neighborhood, and we really just kind of had a lot of energy. It's very, very exciting. I wish you could have seen it.
So how did this project come to be? Is this something you came up with on your own? Is this something you were placed in that position? How did this come to be?
Oh yeah, I just came up with the idea after I graduated college. The idea was originally that it was going to be for to encourage Black entrepreneurship. So it's originally going to be set up in North Omaha, which is kind of the area where minorities live, and it was going to have just 4 or 5 different entrepreneurs living together. Anyhow, throughout the planning phase, kind of realized that it should maybe be more of just a general thing for whoever we wanted to join. And then in the future, we kind of had an idea to maybe go for more specific, like maybe all female house or all Black entrepreneur house. And so, yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story. So came up with the idea, and then I started grad school. I got my first job out of college, and then kind of just looking at notes on my phone in the middle of the night, and I came across this note that I had written in my phone from like maybe 4 or 5 months earlier, and it said that it was like at 2:59 or something a.m. It's like in the middle of the night. So I looked at this note, and it was for the idea of Year of the Startup, and I was like, damn, that's a good idea. And then so from then on, I was just pretty much obsessed with the idea. And then within a few months, I had decided that I was going to quit my job. I was going to drop out of grad school. And so as soon as I came up with the name for Year of the Startup, I decided to quit grad school, and then also quit my day job. And I just worked at a sushi restaurant to finance everything. And then I just kind of bootstrapped it. I just used the money that I made at the sushi restaurant, and it was just pretty simple. Just start out with renting a 4-bedroom house, and then got a board of directors together, found some different entrepreneurs, put out applications for them to apply, and then just kind of started off. And then I ended up getting a couple $50,000 grants from the SBA, and that allowed for some expansion. So that's how it kind of grew to be a pretty big thing. Over the time, I had 5 different houses, 35 different bedrooms, and we were running a lot of Airbnb rooms to kind of also support some of the operations as well. So
why did the project come to an end?
Because it's fucking difficult to live with people you work with, and to live with the customers of your program, and to manage all the conflicts between people that crop up. And then it's an extremely complicated business to run. Ultimately, I would say that we didn't kind of have like that incremental step growth that I think would have been important. So it was really good at the beginning. It was small, it was manageable. You could deal with 4 people. We end up, a couple summers later, we have one house that has 24 people living in it, right? So you got to have your shit together. You got to have processes set up. And then it's good a lot of times if you could just have that kind of incremental step growth, because you're kind of preparing yourself. Each step you go up, you're a little bit more prepared. But I would say that it was a little bit of a gift and a curse to receive the funding. And on the one hand, it did enable some pretty great opportunities. But on the other hand, maybe was not completely prepared to take the most advantage of it. But we had the kind of the real highlight of the whole thing was that we helped one company get to over $1 million in monthly revenue while they were with us. So actually pretty exciting. And then I didn't mention this, but the thing that the most interesting part about it was that it was based on this whole idea that, okay, so you're going to be able to live there for free, but then we're going to take 3% equity in your company. So that was like the real kind of like interesting thing. So you live there for free, but it's kind of free with a catch. It's that you pay money into a fund, like you pay rent basically every month, and then you just get all your rent money back at the end. So that's kind of your incentive structure to make sure that everybody's following through with the program. If you're not following through, you don't get to keep your money. You do follow through, you get to keep your money. You're the startup, gets 3% equity. And so just a pretty interesting model, very hard to actually execute on well. Also, I feel like I didn't do a very good job of reaching out there to like find mentors. Everybody I talked to would be like, yeah, you're doing a good job, man. It's because nobody knew what the fuck we were doing. Nobody knew how to do that. Like there's really no record of who knows how to do that. Who knows how to live with their employees, how to live with their program participants, to live with their interns. You know, you got employees sleeping with entrepreneurs that live in your house. You got air conditioners breaking down. I mean, like, you need some specialization, you know, at some point. And it was such a general, wide, sweeping thing that it was just extremely difficult to be competent at each role. And then the ultimate downfall was making a key firing decision. And then from there, it was just like, if you could have looked at a graph, it would have just been a fucking flat, like just sharp drop.
Sebastian, I know like, when you're talking about how the original idea of You're the Startup was around like Black entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of really cool conversations about like economic development in the Black community, and you have a really interesting perspective on W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So basically, I think that we kind of didn't listen to a man Booker T as much as we should have. You know, when you read some of the stuff that he wrote, he'll talk about these accounts of back in, you know, the 1880s, 1870s, 1890s, accounts of black people actually being so well off that they were loaning their white counterparts money. You know, they're living in two-story brick homes that they had kind of built. And so I really kind of look at it as, you know, Booker T wasn't flashy. He was kind of more of that, to kind of go back to something I mentioned earlier, it's kind of that incremental sort of growth. You know, he was, let's deal with what's right in front of us. Let's look at agriculture, which, you know, at the time, that agriculture and kind of your more things that we'd consider, you know, kind of not the flashy sort of roles, the manual labor, that was something that the black people at the time were extremely skilled at, because they were doing all of those things. And so to kind of make the leap to, hey, let's start studying the classics and let's kind of get esoteric, maybe that jumped over a phase of a necessary phase of progress that the black people may have needed to kind of cement and lock in some of the things that we may have needed to move forward, I guess. And so I kind of, when I think about this, I kind of think about the TLC song, you know, don't go chasing waterfalls, please stick to the rivers and the lakes you used to. And it's really, the waterfalls, we're going to get to the waterfalls. There's no doubt about it. It's just, how are you getting there? And are you going to risk retrograde by what you're doing? You know, I don't want to give up any of the progress that I made. I want to receive all the benefits of the miracles of compounding interest. I want to get a little bit at a time. It's not flashy, but it's kind of that trade-off between the long-term gain and the short-term gain. So,
man, I resonate with what you're saying on such a deep level. I do investing, and just everything that you said, it's the realization that I'm having, that the fear of missing out on a huge potential gain so often like prevents you from capitalizing on the gain you have. There's so many times where I'll have an investment in a stock and maybe I sold part of it the day before and the stock takes off. And I'm so worried about the amount I sold yesterday and the potential loss that I'm not even focused on the actual progress that I made. And I really had that realization not that long ago that I need to find a way to unwork that in my head, psychologically speaking. I'm like, and if I figure that out, that's a very lucrative thing that I would be achieving if I can decondition myself from that.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So moving on, what do you do for your career now?
Right now, I work for the place that has the foster care contract for the state of Nebraska. I do a lot of kind of data analysis stuff. I do process improvement. After winding down year of the startup and everything, kind of looking around, trying to see what I wanted to do. I tried a couple different things. Had a kind of short-lived experience doing a news and opinion site, and then I saw the opportunity come across for the current role I'm in, and I decided to kind of jump on that because when I was 16, I actually lived in foster care for 6 months, and I had a great experience. And so a lot of people, I understand they do not have a good experience, and it's kind of one of those broken systems, and kind of wanted to see, could a little bit of maybe the quantitative or process-oriented mindset go a long way in an industry that's really dominated by the kind of compassionate, high empathy sort of personalities. And so that's kind of, I thought there was a really big role that I could play and make some difference there. So it's kind of what I'm doing now, and learning a lot of new things with data, few different tools.
So how has COVID-19 impacted your line of work?
Well, so our home office is in Kansas, Wichita. They told us that we cannot go to our office anymore to work. I, of course, have been disobeying that. So it's made me have to turn off my camera during Zoom meetings a lot if it's with the home office. And I generally just had to make up a lot of lies, which I don't really particularly like, but to not get caught. But a lot of the case managers, they're now able to do like Zoom meetings with different clients, and it's tough to adapt to. For a while there, we were seeing a lot of a lower caseload, fewer new cases, because a lot of times you get cases referred by teachers, when school starts back up. And so we saw a little bit of a drop there, not the same kind of seasonal effects that we've been seeing before. So you get a little bit of that, and then it's also changed kind of the different types of cases. There's a little bit different proportions of cases that have been coming in, but overall, it's one of those. It's kind of an essential line of work still. So you're still having people go out into the field, and we're still carrying on.
So I've heard, and you confirmed it earlier, so I need to hear about this. You got to interview President Barack Obama. Is this true?
It's not that I interviewed him. It's just that he came to Omaha in 2016, and he was kind of highlighting Omaha as the city that recovered from the Great Recession the best. And so there was like maybe 35 people from the state that were invited to go meet him backstage, and I was selected as one of them, partly because of my work with Year of the Startup, but a lot of it had to do with a good friend of mine was an economist at the White House. And so, let's face it, she had a hand in choosing. So I was able to meet him backstage. It was really cool. It's fairly short, but still meeting, and most of the time was spent with him commenting on my beard. He said that I could give James Harden a run for his money. I had a much longer beard back then, and he said that Michelle wouldn't let him grow one. So it was, it was really interesting to just be in his presence. It's one of those kind of like just surreal moments and then, I mean, not just that, but you're in a room with the 35 other people that got chosen to do this too. So, I mean, that's like the who's who of the state. So that was just a really interesting experience. So, and the best part about it was that we got like professional pictures taken with them. So, got one.
That's dope. You have one hanging on your wall?
No, I had one hanging on my Tinder profile though back then.
Did that work?
Yeah.
Is that a honey pot? Did it bring the bees?
It did. It brought them in abundant quantities. I wrote him a thank you letter.
Nice. With evidence?
Huh?
Never mind. We'll move on from that question.
Those days are in the past.
So, just like Obama, you're of mixed race. You're even writing a book about it. Can you tell us what drove you to write the book you're writing and why?
Yeah, so I think that I don't know if it's necessarily because I'm mixed race or if it's maybe just the mindset that I have, the way that I look at the world. But I'm really interested in trying to kind of reconcile some of the conflicts and trying to take a seat or position myself in a spot that will allow me to kind of maybe dispassionately understand the entire game that's going on, the entire landscape, the situation that's going on. And so I have this vantage point, and I feel a responsibility when you see kind of discord. And if you have family, half your family that's white, half your family that's black, like you maybe have a little bit different insight into maybe the motivations or intentions, and you start to recognize maybe that there's a little bit more complexity than your average pundit or your average white person or your average black person is maybe saying, And so I'm just out here seeing things. I go to my white family for Thanksgiving. I go to my black family in South Carolina. I'm looking at the whole situation. I got to write about it. I have to get it out.
That seems like some really important work, and I've had similar conversations myself, feeling that I can be a bridge, even though I'm not technically mixed race. I'm Dominican. We're just a bunch of mixed people who mixed with other mixed people. So I'm mixed for all intents and purposes. And there's something to what you're saying where sometimes these issues are way more complex than how they're broken down.
Right.
And they're so politicized and so divisive for, I'd say on purpose really, that a lot of the nuance gets lost. But a lot of those conversations, so I'm curious how you tackle them, can be worrisome almost in that certain groups of people, so you may say, hey, well, let me give the white perspective on this, and immediately they'll want to shut you down because they'll say, I don't care about the white perspective.
Sure.
I've been accused recently of protecting white tears, I think it was.
Yeah.
Which is feedback that bothered me to some degree. And the topic was Hamilton, the play.
Sure.
And someone said that white people shouldn't be able to go in a message board for Hamilton and say, hey, cast me in this play, as in like hypothetically, what character could I be? And there was just a lot of agreement that this plays by black and brown people for black and brown people, so that white people should not interfere and pretend essentially to play any of these characters. And my point was, these are black and brown people playing white people. If this logic actually existed, Hamilton wouldn't exist. The play itself wouldn't exist, because again, these are all white people. No one is really asking to be cast, so you're telling people they can't pretend. I felt that was almost like a paper bag test, whether you could pretend to be in Hamilton, which bothered me as well. And there was one more thing that bothered me, but it got me called out as someone who was trying to protect, white tears, because I thought that seemed wrong. I remember my last point was, if that logic holds, that means when I was a kid and I dressed up as Batman, I shouldn't have done that, because Batman is white, and as a white character made by white people for white people, my little Dominican ass shouldn't have been Batman or any character I've ever related to that wasn't Miles Morales, for example. So I relate to that.
It is, and that's the thing. You tried to come at it with you're trying to clarify and trying to get some logic and apply that, and that it seems to be there's a lot of like trouble there. There is a reluctance to commit to certain points of view, or to certain things that can box your opposition in. They don't want to commit to a point, because then if you give me a couple pieces of information, I could do a syllogism, then I could do an if then, I could we have a whole field of symbolic logic that you could kind of get boxed in with, and so I recognize there's a lack of commitment to taking a fixed position, so that they can't get pinned down with logic. And I think that's really difficult to overcome. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do with the series of essays that I'm working on, called Race in America, Mixed Perspective, is to kind of just take different stories or different positions that might on their own seem like an extreme position either way, but when you put them all together, you get that full scope of, okay, this is actually all of Sebastian. And you gotta bring it all to bear, because you might think that I have an unfair opinion on this one, but then when I'm balancing that out with something that is good in the opposite direction that you didn't even think about, so that kind of makes people look at it a little bit differently. So I've got a lot of viewpoints that I think if somebody is trying to just place random bets on like is Sebastian going to believe in this, they would lose all their money, because it's just kind of like a random hodgepodge. But I think it has an underlying kind of logic to it. It has an underlying like sense of fairness to it, and so I'll just, like, for instance, like, I talk a lot about thinking that we should have kind of, one of the articles is pretty provocative title. That's another like thing I'm kind of trying to go with in this, is just like, they're on their own. If you come across them on Medium, like, let's just get everybody riled up, and then once they get into the article to read it, let's bring it back. Let's calm it down then. One article is titled, "If Black people would have listened to Booker T, we would be the Asian of American minorities," right? So kind of commenting, what we talked about earlier. If we would have pursued that strain of thought versus Du Bois's, we would be more successful. So that, on the one hand, paints me as somebody maybe who is sympathetic to white tears also. But then on the other hand, write an article called "Wakandas as Reparations." So that one's arguing the idea that, hey, let's take a look at epigenetics. Let's make the case for reparations. There's evidence that trauma could be stored in the body or could be passed to 13 generations after it was actually after it actually occurred. Let's take a look at reparations. What could we do? What can we do that's a durable
Trauma can be passed 13 generations, you said?
Yes,
This is scientific.
There's some research that it's kind of emerging. I wouldn't say it's proven yet, but it's
a theory.
Yeah, you're getting like New York Times, people like that are writing about kind of this emerging research. It's in academic journals. I wouldn't be able to tell you which one, or which of them. But
I feel like there's before you go on with that, man, you just kind of blew my mind with that in general, because I feel like that's some big implications. Because if trauma can go generations, that means maybe our triumphs and other experiences. It sounds like they may. I don't know. I just heard this theory.
Yeah,
but
it's called epigenetics. So it's a fairly new field. I'm not super adept at science, so I researched what I needed to research for the article, and I wrote this many months ago. So I wish I would have brushed up on that a little bit more. But it's called epigenetics for anybody that kind of wants to follow up on that. But so if we're looking at something like reparations, I'm really interested in, back on the same Booker T strain. After the Civil War, a lot of blacks were primarily located in the South, had all the agricultural skills, all the basic masonry, the skills that it takes to build with your hands and build societies from that standpoint. Even engineering, stuff like that. But overall, very practical kind of vocational stuff. And really, at that time, all we really wanted was land. You got the whole 40 acres and a mule thing that came from some field order at the end of the Civil War, right? So my stance is that I believe in black exceptionalism. I believe that black people don't need to be propped up. I believe that we don't need to be interfered with. What we need is just to be able to have a chance to have our own shit and just stop fucking with us, basically. And like, let's just find out. So I think that we have a ton of federal land, and I think that the movie Wakanda, or the movie Black Panther came out, and it had a city called Wakanda. And I think that what we should do for reparations, we should think about it. We should have a form of durable reparations. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to give money, because I think that it's something different. If you buy the theory that we've skipped maybe some levels in the development as a people, we pursued kind of esoteric goals at the expense of. I mean, think about this. White people, the reaction to slavery and to being treated poorly by white people is that a lot of times you'll find black people that say, I've heard this personally. I don't know how common it is, but be like, no, I don't want to have an urban garden. I heard one person refer to it as sharecropping. You know what I mean? To like think about something as basic as growing your own food, to begin to think about that as something that's beneath, or just the relationship that you could have now to different types of work. And so what I'm suggesting is, let's just go back to the basics, okay? And when you look at a lot of West African countries, or you look at countries near where you came from, the Caribbean, you look at how people who originate from there do once they come to the United States, they have a lot better outcomes. And I think that's because they had the ability to grow up in a society where there wasn't that same sort of the tiers or the racial caste system. I'm sure there is to some extent, but not nearly to the same extent. And then it really culminates in this one key idea, that if I am coming of age in a place that is where I am from the non-dominant racial group, I will forever have so things go bad in life, right? Things go bad in life all the time. Things don't work out your way. I now have the burden of discerning between, was this thing that went bad in my life a result of my race, or was this a result of life is hard, right? So you growing up in the Dominican Republic, when a bad thing happens, I would imagine that the consensus is that the bad thing happened for a reason that is something other than your race. If you're dealing with all people of your race, right? You could be fairly sure that you could rule out that part. So I grew up mixed. I grew up around white people. I grew up around black people as well. I grew up with a dad that is a lot more well off than my mom is, and my dad's black, right? In fact, a lot of my black family is better off. So I kind of got this viewpoint that kind of said, like, if you just kind of got to take it on a case-by-case basis. There's nothing, when in doubt, I do not assume that something happens because of my race. And I think that as a result of that, I now get the rewards of not assuming that it's as a result of my race. You know, there's that thing called the Pygmalion effect that basically says, if you let kids know that they're expected to do poorly on a test, lo and fucking behold, they do poorly on the goddamn test. So I would say that, you know, let's try it out. Let's have an Atlanta sort of thing on a bigger scale. You know, like, they're going crazy out there in Atlanta. I mean, crazy in a good way. Like, they're innovating, and they're producing sustainable, strong black culture in a way that has never been seen before. And I would argue that's because of, there is like a black consensus there. There's a black majority there. They're able to kind of what's my word? I don't know, but it's Atlanta. Everybody wants to go there. That's the Mecca. That's the society. There is a
sense of like shared culture.
There's a sense of shared culture, but there's also there's like a healthy stratification. You know, there's like a stratification where it's not just white people up here, black people down here. It's black doctors up here, your black neighbor there, the black, you know, it's just like it still has some of the elements that all other societies has, but it's just you by and large have removed that element. And here's the worst thing about it. So if I don't know if it's racist or not, that's kind of that's not a falsifiable claim, right? Karl Popper talks about kind of the litmus test of whether it's a scientific proposition or not is, can you prove it false or not? So if you're going to tell me about lived experiences and we're not able to prove that, then so now we're not even in the domain of things that we could prove or not. So everything according to your lived experience, you know, you might be able to say was due to your race, all of your outcomes, and you just don't, your barometer's broken. You don't know what actually was or what wasn't. So if you go live in the Wakanda on the federal land, which we have so many acres of federal land, it'd be a drop in the bucket. And another thing with the whole, you know, how would you want to design a program for reparations? Well, I would say that one of the things you'd want to do, if you want it to be durable, so you want it to last a long time, and I would add to it, you don't want to inflame, racial tension. So I could also understand the idea that, you know, should Rob just cut me a check? I don't think so necessarily, but should Rob's government chip in on some land? I mean, we already got the land, but I don't want it to necessarily be punitive unless maybe you're directing it to, like, I don't know, like descendants of plantation owners or something like that. So, you know,
wasn't that the idea behind Liberia?
Behind what?
Liberia?
Oh, yeah. There's not the infrastructure there, though. I mean, it was the whole other continent. I mean, it is a country today, you know, so it's not that it didn't work, but I think there should be that intermediate solution that, you know, a lot of people want to stay here. We do have federal land. We have this whole kind of movement of people building cities, and you know, Bill Gates is working on a city in the middle of Arizona, a kind of desert type region in Arizona. Why not go ahead and instead of look, why don't we unleash the innovation? Why don't we run our own societies? Why don't, if we have problems with police, let's go ahead and set up our own police.
You know who you sound a lot like? You sound a lot like Louis Farrakhan, who is a person who's not very popular with certain groups of people, but he's very popular in the black community, and these are the sort of ideas that he promotes.
Yeah, I mean, to me it's pretty much a no-brainer. I mean, until you, and I would just really go back and use Atlanta as like, look at how Atlanta is so vibrant, and it offers so many opportunities for black people.
So what led? So something you pointed out, people don't want to work on a garden because they consider that to be sharecropping. So there's almost this stigma where I can't do this, even though it's one of the most essential skills that you can have to build a society, is learning how to cultivate the soil and grow your own food. Another pitfall when I was growing up, because I was the kid in class who tried to learn the vocabulary words. I tried to speak English at a high level because my parents didn't speak English, so I think I felt that pressure. So I guess to compensate. So I was told I talked white because of that. But it's almost like that's another one of those where communication, the ability to communicate with words, is probably one of the biggest skills a leader can have. And then you have young leaders being dissuaded from going that route because now that you're acting white. Yeah. And that's problematic too. It reminded me of that when you mentioned that. So it's almost like all of these pitfalls that are based on trauma, but they're preventing progress going forward. This seems like such a controversial topic, but it's really not. But I've seen a lot of these topics where there's almost like an academic side to it, where you have to just sit down and logically break it down. Right. People tend to not like it. They don't want to put in the legwork to think it through deep enough. They just kind of see the surface level of, oh, well, you're justifying racism.
I think that it's so convenient to, to kind of put white supremacy up there as, the fourth strongest force in the universe. It's it's the panacea. So I could understand how, given the way our brains want to work, that we would tend to want to find a really elegant solution that could explain everything and reduce the need for us to think. And I think that we kind of need to overcome that somehow. And I think the best way is to just don't have fucking white people around, because then you can't blame the white people. Go do your fucking own shit and go be great, go be brilliant, and go fucking build cities in your own likeness and do some Wakanda shit and do all that shit. There's no.
So what if somebody argued that you're promoting segregation? What would you say to that?
So, I'm not saying everybody needs to go there. I'm saying earmark some federal land, put some rules on it, learn from the mistakes that we made with Indian reservations, as far as what you could do with property rights. Don't exclude white people completely, but maybe put some rules on, put some interesting rules on ownership. Look, Hong Kong's a special economic zone. They have different rules there than they have it on the mainland. Do all sorts of stuff. You could have more than one city. You could have quite a few cities. You could have small towns. I just say you got to experiment, because even with like education, so like I'm gonna touch on education and health real quick. There was a study that came out, and it talked about the mortality rates for, I believe it was for black mothers during pregnancy. I want to say it was during pregnancy. Could have been for babies during pregnancy, but it just showed the difference between when they're being treated by a black doctor versus a white doctor, and it was substantially better outcomes when the black doctor was treating. So then there's an analog to that is with education. When there is a black male, a black teacher teaching, it might be specifically black males, that the outcomes are much better. So I'm just saying, look, we're arguing about charter schools and public schools and all that shit. Look, go out there, do some innovation. If you think white people are causing all problems, get them the fuck out of the way. Go do their own shit. Do randomized controlled trials. Do all this stuff. Do a lot of experiments and go live. What are we doing with all these? We got too much federal land that we're not doing anything with. It won't require that much space. I mean, you could literally use like 1% of federal land and more than accomplish what I'm talking about. And you've eliminated the ability for a white person to kind of get mad, think it's a punitive thing, come up with some creative rules that could still encourage trade with, you know, you're not going to want to shut out good ideas from other races at all, but you're going to want to look at some different models that could kind of make sure that it's kind of that, it's called like infant industry protectionism, I guess would be like the economic term, but like to get a foothold and do some sort of thing for the black community to get a foothold. And then once things are kind of on that level playing field that people talk about a lot, but I don't think anybody really has any idea how to actually get to. Because how could you get to anything if you don't know if you're dealing with a problem that's caused by life being difficult or if it's a problem caused by racism, and you fucked yourself so bad that you don't even have a way to figure it out because you don't even put a viable claim out there. It is.
You're touching on some deep stuff, but it almost brings into question, and this is a struggle that I personally have. And I think it comes out often in people who know me well. So I believe in racism. I believe that it does impact the lives of people of color to a large degree. But like you said, there's a lot of the time you don't know when it's racism versus when it's circumstance versus this person just had a bad day. So it ends up being where I feel like there's too much identity politics where we make a lot of assumptions just based on very generic information. And I kind of saw this, man, I'm going to get myself in trouble, but I feel like I saw this with the shootings that happened in Portland and Kenosha, where it's like all white people involved, but based on their political affiliation, it was like, this white guy is good, this white guy is bad. This white guy drove 20 minutes away with a gun to be there. He's a good guy. This guy drove 20 minutes away with a gun, but he's the bad guy. And it came down to politics. And it was like the side that was associated with the Black Lives Matter side, we assume that they're the good ones. And I just can't help but think everyone involved is white, but we're using like racial identity to make some seem more innocent than the others. And then I get to thinking to it, I'm like, part of this seems like bullshit.
It's naked tribalism. It's just a team sport. It has been just disrobed completely. And I don't know. So you mentioned, like, you know, there's racism that does exist. That's important. And my argument, or what I would respond to that with is absolutely right. That's why we should be striving to prove that. So you have like the tests for implicit bias that measure in milliseconds. You know, like there's scientific tests like that. You know, you see a picture of a white person, you see a picture of a black person, and then you have to choose on a screen if something's good or bad, right? There shouldn't be any difference between how quickly you are able to identify something as good just because you saw a black person first, right? So we're able to put together tests like that, and I would argue that like that's what we need to be doing. Or there's been some good work on putting out fake resumes and then measuring callbacks, and the only thing you're changing is the name on the resume. So we've got some good stuff like that, and we could get really good data out there. And I think that we should be okay. So if I'm a person that is inclined to believe that something is, if I err on the side of it's racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would think that I would want to strengthen my case by putting forth irrefutable evidence. And I guess what I'm seeing is just like that doesn't seem to be a value that is shared, I guess. And so I would kind of, I mean, I really see this as a kind of getting into like the nature of truth, postmodernism, stuff like that, and taking a look at different like departments, you know, like gender studies departments and black studies departments, and looking at the are they rigorous? Like what's happening in universities? Is there diversity of thought? Is there, you know, what they call institutional disconfirmation, like where you have a high enough percentage of like political diversity on your staff? And so what this kind of crisis in some departments in academia is causing is it's leaving a lot of the academic journals kind of vulnerable for like hoax papers. And we saw that a couple of years ago with Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay, and Helen Pluckrose. I think they got 11 out of 20 fake papers that they wrote into these like different kind of feminist or gender studies or race studies academic journals, and they're just absolutely bullshit.
Because they just confirmed the biases they already had, and since most of them had the same biases, they just slid on through.
And you're looking at these things, and we're looking at like, okay, like to me, I see it as an erosion of the basic things we agree on, you know. So like, what do we really have to agree on? We can't agree on the definitions of words. What does racism mean? I don't know. 10 years ago, it meant that you don't like people based on their race, basically. Now it's the privilege plus power. Okay, I get that. You added a definition. However, does that mean that the previous definition doesn't exist? Can you render a definition obsolete? How do we decide on that? We don't have a basis anymore for deciding anything.
This conversation, I love this conversation. And I can see now why Rob wanted me to have a conversation with you. I understand now. So I struggle with this because there's this belief I have, again, where the logic comes in and it doesn't make sense. But if I say it openly, then I feel like I get the stigma that I'm transphobic. So I've always had the belief that men should not speak on abortion because we don't have the reproductive parts. We weren't born a woman. We don't know what their life is. So we really shouldn't comment on that. But on the other side of the coin, I'm also to believe that our gender is fluid, which means, logically speaking, that you can be born in a male body and understand and have the full experience of a woman. So if a man can be born and have the full experience of a woman, not having those reproductive parts, then why can't a man comment on abortion? And it's one of those topics where I try to think of it logically and it just does not mesh. And I don't speak on it openly, and I might even have to edit it out of this, again, because I feel some sort of pressure. But when I think of the logic, it doesn't check out. It's one or the other.
You got to do in that situation is just call him a TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist. I see it on the internet all the time. It seems to work. So I think that, look, here's the deal. Can black people comment on black stuff? Can men comment on women's stuff? I think you can. Are you going to listen to the opinion as much? I don't know. But if you got a really hard problem, I think you want more people trying to solve it. That's just like the fundamental way that I address this. I'm not saying we weight every opinion equally. I actually have a kind of interesting opinion on abortion that I will share real quick. I could understand. I think in maybe 100 years, we're going to look back on abortion as something that we're not proud of and that's extremely barbaric. I think that it's pro-choice is the way to go right now, for sure. but here's the thing. So I think it's reasonable to think that to feel some type of way about a fetus, which you know will grow into a human, being killed. I can understand how people think about that as a human. I also understand, I think it's more important that if somebody doesn't want to have a baby in their body, they shouldn't have a baby in their body. So I think that wins, and I think that the future of the abortion debate is to figure out a scientific solution, a medical breakthrough, something, so that we don't have to have this dilemma anymore. Because I think they're fundamentally true things. A woman should be able to not have a baby inside of her, doesn't want to, and people are going to think that things that will grow into babies in a few months are like babies. You're not going to reduce that. What you could do is you could get people together, and maybe it'll take 150, 200 years. I don't know. But you could start on that road of starting to think together about what does that look like. Because we did it with birth control. We've done it with condoms. We've reduced some of these. We've reduced the amount of time that people get put in this situation. And I think we could maybe, if we can't completely eradicate it, we could maybe eradicate 99% of what we have now in the future. We have fucking supercomputers out there. The world's going to be a completely different place in a few years. I don't see why this isn't something that we can't talk about in that manner. And then I think it helps us get back to a place of working with other people. Like, why can't Planned Parenthood work with, whatever, I don't even know an organization that is a pro-life one, but whatever the pro-life organization is, and just have a meeting or two about that, and just think about it. Because I think in a perfect world, no, I don't want the right to be mad. I don't want the left to be mad. I just want everybody to kind of be all right.
That's another one. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
I just wanted to bring something up. I saw a quote today that I think you'd really like, especially compared on in the context of a lot of stuff you're talking about today. It was, the definition of an ideologue is someone who has all the answers and none of the facts.
I like that.
That's on the nose.
That's another subject that I feel I'm right there with you on, almost to a T. So I remember cringing at a rally when a girl said, I'm absolutely abortion positive. And to me, I've always viewed what I choose to be as, I'm pro-choice. Again, like you said, it's not my decision, but I've never viewed myself as pro-abortion. And There's been always almost like a cheerleading aspect to it that never sat right with me, personally speaking. I don't speak on it because, again, it's normally not popular to speak on, even though I am pro-choice and I defend that. And I understand how in almost every single society, women having access to birth control has opened and flourished their opportunities and their ability to not be secondary to men. I understand that, and I would promote that 100%. But I've had friends that describe it like going to a doctor and getting a mole removed, and they remove all meaning and life out of it. Like it's just a cluster of cells. It's not a big deal. And then I think to myself, well, how about the women that lose at that same phase of their life, at that same stage, and it wasn't their choice? Aren't you kind of invalidating their feelings if they did feel that they just lost a baby? I feel like you're invalidating what that is. And if I'm not invalidating what that is, I feel it's fair for me to have some feelings about that as well. Again, even though I would never tell anyone not to do it, I wouldn't comment on it. I see your perspective 100%. And I can see where the conversation, we do look back and we think, wow, this is pretty barbaric, because without that interference, there'd be a lot more stories. And that's just a fact.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting when you try to I think it's really hard to be logically consistent. I just want to say that. Like, if you were to take a fine-tooth comb over somebody's entire set of beliefs and try to reconcile everything, like, who would pass that? So
yes,
that has to be said, but that's what I'm still going to do right now.
I still try.
So all right. So a lot of the people who would be pro-choice, they would a lot of the time be the same people who would maybe get really outraged when the white person had the dreadlocks, and they would say that's my culture. So that's an inanimate thing, like that or say wearing a kimono, maybe appropriating the culture. They will get more upset about that than and not be able to understand. Here's my thing: not be able to understand how a person could identify stronger with a 3-month-old fetus than they identify with fucking kimonos. Okay, that is stupid. That is so dumb, and it's not consistent. And Saul Alinsky, in the Rules for Radicals, like, hold your opposition to their own set of principles. Something like that is one of his rules. And so I'm just like, when I'm trying to do like the moral balancing here, I'm trying to do the moral algebra, trying to weigh things out. I'm just like, that part doesn't make sense to me. I get why people could get sentimental about a 3-month-old fetus, because people get sentimental about fucking blankets and shit. People, come on. So, like, to me, if you want to have an honest conversation about it, you got to say, look, I recognize that you get sentimental about that shit. That's fine. That's your lived experience, and that's reasonable. I might not get sentimental about that, but ultimately, my right to not have a baby inside of me wins. And I just don't see a lot of like that recognition of the other side. Like the other side doesn't have humanity or a point, or they're just like dumb or something like that. Like, no, people want to have babies in them. They don't need to have babies in them. People don't want to see fetuses, get aborted. They're going to feel bad about it. It's just probably a fact of life until we recognize that and try to push through that.
Here's a hot take. I will argue that that's the exact issue that cost the Democrats the election in 2016, in that they just viewed everyone that voted for Trump as just racist. They were racist because they're racist and hate black people. They voted this guy to be their president because he's racist too. Not seen, and Michael Moore touched on this even before the election, these people that voted from him are from the Rust Belt. They lost manufacturing. They lost jobs. For the first time, they may have had a good amount of privilege, but they feel that privilege going away. And they feel that voting for Trump, I think Michael Moore said it was like throwing a grenade to blow up an establishment they felt had thrown them aside. And when you are living that, when you have been fired, when everyone you know is suffering and going through it, and at the same time, all of that is being dismissed and just really just branded as, oh, they're a bunch of racists. I can see that being frustrating. And I can also see, I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I can see where using that mentality and not looking for the nuance, not trying to understand the other side, not reaching out and being like, hey, we know what you're going through. We actually want to speak on that, instead of just being like, hey, we're not racist. I saw a tweet the other day, and it kind of touches on all of this. And it said, a poor person saying, please help us. And it said Republicans, no. And then it said Democrats, no. And then it had like the rainbow flag, hashtag Black Lives Matter, and then the Black Power fist right next to it. And it was funny. I shared it on my Facebook because it was funny, but it was so telling to me what the meme was really saying. Essentially, they're both saying no to this real issue, but one is just so much nicer to read and see. It's a lot more pleasant to deal with.
And going back to your hot take about the election and kind of writing off the Rust Belt and places that lost their manufacturing base and just generally are doing not as well as maybe some of the coastal places. It's interesting, and it's very elegant that you could just be like, yeah, well, are they white? Are they crying? Well, then that's white tears. So why would I care about that? You know what I mean? It's like, it's just, it's so, like, to me, and you know what? I listened to a Jordan Peterson, I think it was either a debate or an interview. Whoever he was
Do
debating.
you like Jordan Peterson?
I do. I don't like everything he says, but I think he's great. And
I love Jordan Peterson. I have to admit.
He was.
I'm gonna be canceled, Rob. Damn it.
He was talking to her, and he was kind of giving his critique of people that were like her, basically. And one of the things that he says is, he said, you guys just give me your kind of boilerplate, ready-made responses, and it's not good because I don't get to know what you think. I don't get to hear your own individual perspective. Like, I have a belief that, you know, everybody has something to offer everybody else. Everybody has a unique perspective that only they can see to some degree. And so when you just see kind of that, like, you'll notice this, like, you could have a lot of white people crying. 2015, white people cried. Okay, they've been crying the whole time, but say they just started in 2015, and people were like, "Yeah, we shouldn't hurt people." 2016, white people crying, "We shouldn't hurt people." 2017, they come up with the fucking term "white tears," and now you just put that trademark sign after that, and now it's like you don't got to say nothing else. You just have to say, "We don't do the white tears here." Sorry. And so it's like, you could just give something kind of like a little catchy name, and it changes the way that people think about the underlying concept.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable how that's done. And so Rob and I and Luke Hoffman from Hoffmania, we all went on a road trip in 2017, and we went from Nebraska to Berkeley, San Francisco area, swung around Grand Canyon. We went to like 20 states, probably 25 states, I don't know. But this was right after the election happened. We got to see the entire country pretty much. And it was just driving through the entire country in 20 days or whatever. It is not too difficult to see how some people could feel like they've been left behind. And how some people, you know, like sometimes some people piss me off, and if they all are just like acting irrational and doing the same stupid shit and denying my humanity, sometimes I want to do the opposite of whatever they're wanting me to do, even if I don't believe in that thing. You know what I mean? But when I compare the thing that they don't want me to do to them, the thing that they don't want me to do starts to seem like the good thing. You know what I mean? And I just think that's like just an interesting quirk in our psychology that, like, you know, you keep saying I'm a racist, like, I'll be your fucking racist then. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I can't do that apparently because, you know, I'm not white, but shit, I mean, maybe about another topic, you keep saying I'm whatever, I might be that thing for you then, just to show you, I guess. Try it out.
It's been weaponized to such a crazy degree, because I know I have an ability where I can have these conversations because I'm okay listening, and I'm okay getting through the discomfort, maybe the initial, oh wow, that's really racist, this person just said something really racist. I can get past that discomfort and try to see the truth in what they're trying to tell me from their perspective. I have neighbors that are like that are white, and I could have real awkward interactions, and I choose not to. But I feel like it's been weaponized where it's almost like in the back of my mind, like that makes me a sellout, or that makes me like I'm doing something wrong. And even just from a human level, how is trying to connect with someone on a human level and show them your humanity? It's promoted as a bad thing, but having this conversation with you, it's not, and I shouldn't feel that it's a bad thing.
And let's think about it. If this is actually a real problem that is deserving of a solution, what better approach to solving problems do we have than the scientific process, the scientific method? We don't have a better process. There's not anything that's better than that. So one of the things that you might want to do is, you know, make some, you're trying to solve a problem, get some dispassionate observations, try to be objective about it. And then you want to dig into why, what are the factors that influence this? And it's really tough to get those if you're interacting with the experiment. You know what I mean? If you're part of the experiment, you're not going to get good results, you know? And so I think that there's a lack of like curiosity. Like I look at it like, okay, like, first of all, if somebody came up to me and said, "You fucking nigger," first of all,
Drop the hard
I
hand
think
on my podcast.
I think black people are great. So I don't have any insecurity about that. So I think that, man, that's crazy. Like why would somebody even think that way? So my first thing, because I don't, like, I mean, like you go up to Michael Jordan and drop that to him, like what's he gonna feel? You know what I mean? Like what's somebody who is a king from Africa? You're gonna make them feel bad about their race? They're secure in that. You know what I mean? And so, like, first of all, like that's how I come at it. But after that, I'm like, okay, if it's really a problem and it's causing harm to people that they're saying that, let's try to understand more about why, right? And so I don't know any other problem that you're trying to get somebody to learn that you kind of approach it that way, like the way that we approach like racism, like shaming people. I would love to see like a randomized controlled trial on like doing a couple methods, like, okay, I'm gonna try to shame racists into not being racist, or that one dude that I'm sure you've seen this dude who tries to be friends with the KKK, and then he gets
I think Daryl's his name is
Daryl something or another. So it's like, okay, if it really is a big problem,
he gets criticized for it too.
Okay, but it is effective, and it's more than that. It's something we could measure. So it's like, let's try to measure these things. If they're big problems, let's try to actually put together a program that is evidence-based instead of just like, it's a free-for-all. There's no leader. There's no Thurgood Marshall. There is no cat herder. It is a free-for-all, and I think that part of that's unavoidable because there's social media, and it by nature is a free-for-all. But like, Sean King could be like a Thurgood Marshall, but he's more like whipping people up into a frenzy more. There's no discipline in the movement. And I believe that the Black Lives Matter movement, for instance, is trying to bring in too many things that aren't essential to, like, okay, what's the objective? Is it to get less black people killed by cops? Like what's the objective? I just think there's better ways to do it, and I can't even bring a critique of that without oh yeah, you're sympathetic to white supremacy, Sebastian.
And let me tell you why that's dumb. And anyone can look this up. This show is called Cointelbro. I didn't come up with that name. That is based on Cointelpro, where the government was sending pretty much their agents into every top pro-black organization and destroying them from the inside. For anyone to trust the Black Lives Matter organization and just that it has the interest of black people at its heart and that it can't be questioned at all, sounds like government propaganda of a program just like that.
Yeah, it could be. And I mean, like, and it's funny because I had criticisms of Black Lives Matter, okay, and then everybody's like, oh, you don't think Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, I just don't even respond anymore. But then that group out of Georgia came out called the No Fucking Around Coalition. They came with the guns and marched on fucking Stone Mountain. And then all of a sudden you could have a criticism of Black Lives Matter because now there was like an established, a board certified excuse to not like everything that Black Lives Matter does. And I just think, to me, it just points to like the inability to just fucking think for yourself. Like, think about it. I agree with the mission. It's obvious. And in fact, it seems like maybe 98% of people agree with the mission. A lot of people, there's a very broad consensus of it. So then, okay, if you're saying that there's a problem, right? Let's just say it's a medical problem instead of a societal problem. Two doctors, there's a cancer, okay? Patient has cancer. We're arguing about how to treat the cancer. You're not going to go ballistic on somebody that has a different opinion than you about how to treat the cancer. You have a way that you can solve that.
It shouldn't be that way.
You can solve that. And so it's like, to me, it just makes me question, like, what, like, I don't know.
Let me tell you this. Part of the issue for sure is these tech companies and their algorithms are promoting a certain narrative, and anything that veers off from that narrative is not only, it's either being pushed aside or it's only being shown to people who already agree with that. So it's creating these echo chambers already. I think a lot of these problems coincide almost perfectly with social media and how social media has expanded.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it.
There's
I'm
sorry.
No, go ahead, Rob.
I was just gonna say, just like a quick note, it's like really surprising to me to hear that like I'm the only white guy in this conversation and no one ever accuses me of being sympathetic with white supremacy. Like that's not something that like anyone ever comes and like labels me with. So like
Only white people tell me that.
that's so crazy. That's so crazy.
That's why, man. That's why, like, look, I say to me, it's like these same fucking zealots were the people 15 years ago that I felt like didn't like me because of my race. I don't fucking trust any of that shit. I think the converts are the biggest zealots, and I feel like they've got a lot of shit that they know that they've done, and they're trying to make up for it. And I just don't believe that beliefs change that fast. I just don't believe it. I don't think we're going to be able to rush the process. I think that the way that you do it is you got to go step by step. And I think that Booker T, he said something that it's kind of a little bit racist, but it's paraphrased, but it's pretty much true. I agree with it. But what he basically said is he said that blacks will earn the respect of other races by proving that we are, proving our value, and that's by sticking to his various principles that we're going to let's do stuff in front of us. Let's have that kind of we're going to focus on trades, agriculture. We're going to take care. We're going to kind of focus on like the more endogenous sort of variables that we could focus on, and then move out. And I think that is like an enduring like feature that any society that lives, that you have to survive evolution. Like you have to survive. So I think there's a more elegant way to say what he said. And our ancestors, I look at this a lot, man. I was in the Ozarks like a couple months ago, and like I was talking to this white guy. He was about to start telling me that I was sympathetic to white supremacy. He was telling me I was wrong and all this shit. Anyhow, I was like, you know what, man? And I don't know what to do, how to feel about something. I just think about, would I be making my ancestors proud? And I think about what my ancestors had to go through. I think about how tough they were. I think about like Harriet Tubman. And, I think about Harriet Tubman as my ancestor, So it's like, because we don't know. I don't know if she was or not. So I think about that, and I'm like, what fucking right do I have? What right do I have to not go out there and to be my best and to do things that I think will let them down? We're talking about you can't wear fucking braids. Yo, they wanted to maybe only be beaten 3 times a month, not 5. You know what I mean? Like, what right do I have to not go out there and try to make them proud and to build off of that and to hustle and to
you just reminded me of these kids who've been saying, especially around these last few months, they say stuff like, I'm not my ancestors, I'll whoop your ass. And every time I see that, I know how soft I am. And I know these kids coming up are even softer. So anyone to say that with the shit that our ancestors dealt with, for us to be able to say some shit like that and feel safe saying it, it's so infuriating. And I feel it touches on what you're saying.
Yeah.
And someone you mentioned earlier, you mentioned Jordan Peterson. I legitimately think he's like the biggest victim of this that we're talking about. Because if you actually listen to his opinions aren't like politicized. They don't feel like they're coming from a place of hate or bias. He has all of these facts. He has all of these ideas, and he places them in a way that makes sense. Is he right about everything? No, like you said, I don't agree with everything he says either. He's given me some of the best advice on dealing with my own children, on being less angry, on how to, better raise them, things I can do better to improve myself. He promotes the idea of taking a sacrifice. So life is about taking a heavy burden and a heavy sacrifice and carrying it, and how that makes you a better person. I'm like, a person that promotes this, people are on Twitter were wishing his death.
Yeah.
He was dying in bed and his wife was dying of cancer. We're wishing him to die. Yeah. And I hear him and I'm like, where's the disconnect?
Yeah. I mean, it's so ironic because when I try to look at it, and obviously I can't look at it completely objective because nobody can, but when I try to look at it objectively, I'm like, man, the left should be like sending thank you letters to Jordan Peterson, because he, in my opinion, he's the only thing that was standing between a lot of, early 20s dejected white males that could have otherwise become radicalized, could have become alt-right type people. I feel like he gave them more than just some advice. He gave them like an operating system for how to approach the rest of their lives, and and I think that that's going to ensure that they will not become radicals, and so I just think that's the biggest irony in it, is that like I think he has single-handedly done more for the left than probably any other person in recent political history, in my opinion. Just with his enormous following. Maybe I would put Joe Rogan up there too, because I feel like you got these guys that are kind of situated in that spot, and they're talking reason. They're not your Rush Limbaughs, or they're a lot more reasonable, and you could tell they want to find the truth, and that's the thing. They care about what is true, and they will work hard to find it, and they're willing to be brave, and they're willing to go extreme, and they're willing to be unpopular for a little bit in the pursuit of getting to that. And I just think that was an ideal that used to be like commonly held, and that at some point it has kind of gotten lost.
Man, I don't want to turn this into a Jordan Peterson episode, but I think I may have to bring you on in the future, and we may need to have a Jordan. Yeah. I do want your opinion on this, because this is something I learned from him and actually blew my mind, and it seems relevant. He brought up a statistic that in Scandinavian countries that have like egalitarian societies where it's government policy, for there to be equality with employment between men and women.
There's less women in STEM.
They still end up seeing the same, almost the gender roles take over, even though it's not, they're purposely putting policy in place to prevent that.
Yeah.
They're naturally going into the same positions.
It's super interesting. I mean, like, the amount of hubris that it takes to think that you can somehow, with the stroke of a pen, maybe overwrite millions of years of evolution. It is an enormous amount of hubris. And I'm not saying that there is something that hardwires, I'm not speaking specifically about this instance, although it seems like there's a strong case that from an evolutionary standpoint, there's a little bit more incentive for women to be more interested in people, and men to be a little bit more interested in things. And there was a division of labor that seems to have been present, at least to some extent, maybe not in 100% of societies. And you'll hear about these one-off societies where there was, the women were, I don't know, out fighting the wars, and the men were whatever, cooking. I'm sure that there's a few examples of that, and there's going to be outliers. I don't know what else to say about that, but I think it makes sense. I mean, like, the woman body, like, has another body come out of it. Like, that just entails different things then, like, women aren't going to be able to maybe run as fast or jump as high. So if anything involves maybe like a higher degree of athleticism, maybe men start doing that a little bit more, and maybe there's other things that go along with that, So to me, it doesn't seem, it just, it's just really interesting when we set these goals and they seem arbitrary, and we say, well, if there's 51% of women in the population, we should have 51% of the tech jobs being women. So it's like, okay, well, I guess you could pick out this one thing, but good luck trying to balance that throughout all the different the ways that you could balance it. That's
But
going
they
to be
should be 51% of garbage men too.
yeah, that's the world's largest Sudoku game then. That shit's hard. It's hard to play Sudoku on fucking beginner level sometimes. You're playing like the biggest Sudoku game in the history, and it's not ever gonna work. And so, like, I try to bring this up, and that's what just makes me mad is that you can't look. There's a lot of smart people that I disagree with, but we can't ever even get to the point where we talk about the real shit, because we're always talking about shit that they're boilerplate, ready-made responses. And so that's like what frustrates you the most is like these people that are brilliant, and like you can't ever get to hear what they actually think because they don't do it.
I'll just make a note on this too. Like we also don't know if there are cultural, like how much of it is like genetic versus cultural, and then how much is epigenetic. We haven't even like got into that. So like when there's a policy change that's supposed to bring some sort of equality, we don't know like what all the factors are that are driving right. that are keeping that in place. And that's where we get to the more these questions of like what's the empirical truth there. But there is something to be said too though about unintended consequences. And I think this is something that like as it became more and more acceptable for women to be in like new jobs in the workplace, it became more and more expected for women to have jobs in the workplace. And I think that has driven a lot of this this problem with the like declining leisure time in the United States, where like people aren't really allowed to like stay at home and like take care of their kid unless they're in like higher and higher like socioeconomic status. And if you're like very rich, it's actually easier to be a stay-at-home dad these days than it was like 30 years ago. But like unless you're in that like top 20% of society, you don't have that luxury. And that not only takes away options for parents, but it also takes away one-on-one time for kids and hurts kids' development. And like, you don't even have to say like maybe it should be a woman or a man staying at home or something, but like that one-on-one attention for kids to be able to have that, like it's not a good substitute to like have childcare try to take up all of that, especially if that childcare is low quality. So I'll just take that as my little like rant about like we gotta care about the children.
That's huge. You don't get the first 18 months of life right. Kids don't hear enough words. Some of the stuff that I've seen from like Stephen Dubner and those Freakonomics guys, that you almost can't recover from that. The child can't recover from that. And so there's the kind of childcare issues, and then look at the rate of single parent households. Like when you look at those two graphs together. So I think that's right, that there's these ideals, and I think that it's a really like I'm not ever just gonna argue like if a woman wants to work, she shouldn't work, or that there shouldn't be an equal amount of women working for whatever percentage of the population they have, or there shouldn't be a parity with men. But like I don't think that there's enough time spent looking at all these things that happen as a result of that. And Jordan Peterson really I like the way that, he kind of talks about it. Like, it's true. And nobody likes to hear it. I feel like there's kind of been a rejection of like the things that I understand to be the principles of evolution. Like, namely that most new things do not work. Good idea, sounds like a good idea, but like it's just it's not because somebody wasn't smart enough, or because
it was like your commune
system that has developed for so long
to figure out what didn't work. You had to do it first though to figure out what didn't work.
Absolutely you do have to experiment. I think that's the case for when I say, well, let's have Wakanda as reparations, or let's start some charter cities. That's me saying, that's me acknowledging that and saying that we don't want to have an experiment that involves 100% of the population, because we have no idea what the latent effects are going to be.
But people are so precious about their ideas. That's like the big barrier to this. So like, in my work, I've been getting more and more into the education world, and the federal government has standards for education evidence. The top tier is randomized controlled trial. The second is quasi-experimental. And then as you go below that, it's like, a controlled regression, and then like just pre-post. And I'm always like trying to get them like, hey, let's get as close to randomized controlled trial as we can. And like the pushback I'm always hearing is, well, we don't want to like give something to some kids and not give it to the other kids, because then those other kids are going to miss out. And it's like, you don't know if they're missing out. You don't know if this works. For all you know, this could be hurting these kids who are in the program. And that happens.
And
people
it
come
could
up
be
with
hurting.
programs that end up hurting kids because, even if it's doing something good, maybe it's pulling them away from another thing. But if you're so precious with your program that like before you even know if it works, you think that it works, you could end up harming children because you're putting it on everyone when you don't even know what the outcomes are.
Yeah.
Hey, you touched on something earlier about your confidence. And I've come to notice I have a similar confidence. And when I didn't have as much confidence when I was younger, I almost wanted the validation, I guess, of feeling like white people like validate me, be better to me, treat me better. But then I've just grown and I've matured and I've reached a point where I don't want that. And to some degree, it's almost insulting because it's almost patronizing. A lot of the interactions, when you do have that confidence, you view the interactions as patronizing. It's like, this person thinks they're better than me. They're not saying it directly, but there's almost like they're fetishizing my oppression. And it becomes so obvious. And then these are the people. So for example, like BIPOC, BIPOC, that's a new term.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of white people like saying, I don't know what that means, or they'll screw it up. And then other white people yell at them for being ignorant. And then I'll chime in and say, I've been a person of color for 32 years, and I learned that like last month from a white woman. But they do this thing where they start controlling the narrative for people of color, and then other white people think that's actually what people of color are saying. And it ends up again, and you brought up a quote. I forgot who you said it was. I think it was Booker T. Washington. But there was a quote from a video, and I sent this to Rob last week, of Malcolm X talking about white liberals and white conservatives.
Yeah.
And he like summarized everything that I'm seeing right now. And he says white liberals use black people as a pawn when it comes to voting, but they both promote white supremacy, just on opposite ends, just in different ways. And that's what I've picked up on. And what it's caused me is now anyone that's a strong loyalist of the Democrats immediately takes me being anti-Democrat as being a Republican.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, I mean, it's funny. I only generally will vote for Democrats, but like in conversations, like, just to save time, I'll just say I'm a Republican, just because like I already know I'm gonna get called that. So it's like
that's where I'm at.
It's so bizarre, but like on the confidence thing, man. So there's actually a formative experience I think gave me a lot of this. Like, I remember one time I was maybe like 4 or 5 or something like that, and I remember my mom, who's white, she was like, Sebastian, do you know that white people they go to these places and they pay money to get their skin the same color as yours? I was like, for real? And so like from that day, it's just like, okay, well, a white person is telling you that other white people, and it's like it's documented. Like I've seen it. They go to Ashley Lynn tanning and all that shit. And so I'm like, all right, like I don't have anything to feel bad about. So I don't like the way that I kind of look at it is like, I mean, if I ever like ran for office, I probably wouldn't talk about this ever again, but this is how I think about it. Okay. When the Irish and them came over, Irish and like maybe Italians, there was a racism there. We'd call it racism, right? Today we would call it racism. Back then, I don't know if you call it racism. I think that you would have thought that Italians were a lot more different of a race than the rest of the American whites back then, right? Like each new European group was almost like a different race. To me, I kind of think about it as like a little like cultural hazing, like kind of, to me, if like I like the racist people in like the South better, because they at least like they thought black people were like a competitive threat. So like if you don't like me but you think that like I'm a competitive threat, then it's like, well, yeah, Isaiah didn't like Michael, but like they were on different teams, like it's understood. But
Yeah.
like if you don't like me and you think that I'm not shit and never gonna be shit, and you gotta prop me up and you gotta like I'm dependent on you and all this stuff, then I'm like, man, that is like, you don't like me and you don't think I'm gonna be anything. So like, who would I choose to like more? I like the guys that view me as a competitive threat more. So that's the way I think about it, man. If
Beautiful.
you know what, like Booker T, I think he thought about it that way. Like, look, we're gonna go out here, we're gonna compete. We could compete. We can't. Nobody could say we can't compete. We go out there, we know the rules of the game. Don't change the rules of the game on me. Let's go compete. I'm ready to get it. I got energy, and I'll show you. I love that opportunity.
All right, so I do want to ask this so that we can wrap it up, because this has been an amazing conversation. This is why I made this show. I want to have these interactions, and I want to have a platform to have these discussions. And it's probably going to turn some people off, but some people are going to listen, and I think a light will click. And that's cool with me, because, Rob, you pointing out that you don't get called a white supremacist, but us as men of color have to face being called white supremacists by white people. Like, imagine that. A white dude went up to you and legitimately started questioning you and your perspective as a man of color, as a white man. And that happens all the time. And I'll call it out. And I feel like we need to start calling it out openly, aggressively. That's what happened to me. They tried to shut me down, something about white tears. And I said, it's funny how quickly you are to invalidate my perspective as a man of color. That reminds me of what white people do. I'm confused what the difference is here. Man, I had an experience that was even worse. This girl called me out for the white tears. So I pretty much told her to stop gatekeeping me. And it was funny how quickly she was trying to silence me as a man of color. And she went and tagged some moderators and admins and said, admins, this person is bothering me. So she immediately went to the Karen move, right? Immediately went to the Karen move that's gotten how many fucking black men killed in life?
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, she talks a good game. She's all about, but she's full of shit. It ain't about shit. Man, what a great discussion. But the question I want to wrap this up with, Booker T. Washington, you said back then, the condition of black people, they were making money, they had the skills, they had the ability, they were working together. That's no longer the case. What happened, and did something happen by design? Do you feel there's something that was done because, like you said, people viewed it as a threat? If that continued to grow, that it could grow into a monster they couldn't prevent, so they try to cut it off early? Was there some of that going on?
I think, well, to be clear, I don't think every black family was thriving. There were just examples from I believe there's a book, Up From Slavery. And so I think that there is a number of factors. I mean, directly after the Civil War, I mean, you had the Union Army occupying the South for however many years, I think 5 or 6 or 7 or something like that. And so they were able to enforce some measure of equality. I think that you had, the thing is that, you get rid of slavery, and then there's always a loophole. So then, okay, there's that whole, what is it called? The peonage laws or something like that, where if you were a black adult, you need to be employed by a white person. You need to have a 1-year labor contract, or you could go to jail. And so then, of course, there's the convict lease system. So that's handy. So you can put me in jail for not working for a white fella. And then I go to jail, and then you got this handy rule in the books that says I have to basically be a slave again. So so then you get rid of that, and then there's just always another like area that it's gonna go into. You know, like I'm gonna always find a way to kind of to cheat you. And so I think that you know, I don't know. I don't think that we were as a people doing all that well back then. So I can't really say that we've fallen off. I think there are more like pockets that were following kind of those principles, that kind of incremental society building from the ground up sort of principles. And then they kind of mushroomed into some examples like, you know, Black Wall Street, everybody knows about that. And then that, you know, just completely got bombed and destroyed. And so you can see how that shakes confidence in doing that incremental growth. So to me, that when I look at the most harmful things is when there are problems with like the legal system, or there's like pulling the carpet out from under us, making a deal and then reneging on it, that sort of thing. And I think there's just a lot of those examples over time. And then there's the kind of rise of like, you know, hey, this party will kind of take care of you and do stuff in exchange for your votes. And then kind of what I call like the exogenous fetish, like fetishizing all these solutions that are not endogenous, not things that you could control. And so I ultimately think that, like, you know, what you need to do is you need to focus on factors that are within your control, because they are within your control. And you should just fucking write those down and just focus on those things. And any attempts to make people not trust that process, like I would take that really seriously. You know what I mean? Like, so if somebody's doing something right and then, you know, whatever, the government pulls the carpet out, that to me is shaking the confidence in the system. And that is the type of stuff that I would, you know, advocating for like serious protests around.
Man, what a jam-packed episode. There's definitely enough to chew on here. You can listen to this one 3-4 times. There's a lot of content in this one. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Definitely someone I want to be a repeat guest and a Facebook friend. We're going to be chatting.
Absolutely. Great chatting with you, and I appreciate you getting this together, Rob.
Rob, how do you deal with both of us? How did you add me into your life having this guy already?
You know what? I think there's an echo of one of y'all in every Midwest city, I guess.
There's only one of us.
Yeah, you just walk. Yeah, one person, but you walk in different ways and you take different names.
Yeah, my girlfriend was asking. She said, "Who's the podcast with?" And I said, "Oh, it's Rob's other black friend."
I'm glad I didn't stop recording, because that's definitely going in the book.
I was like, yeah, he's just got the two, so, you know, we wanted to get us in the same room.